Good afternoon, everyone. Boy, that's on loud. This is being recorded, so when you come up to ask questions, make sure you stand over here and I'll hand you the mic. So there will be a question and answer period. And what I'd like everybody to do right now is please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I Thank you. I would like to introduce our Chief Matt Hamner.
Thank you. I hope that every time I get introduced, there's always clapping. You always wonder. So I have some news to share with you. Many of you are not aware or may not aware, and I can't answer a lot of questions about it. So you had a shooting last night here in Sun Lakes. It did not involve anyone outside of Sun Lakes. So everyone involved are residents here. Can't talk about addresses or circumstances. They will survive or are presumed to survive the shooting. So someone was shot last evening. It is an active investigation. We are currently investigating the incident, and of course it'll be reviewed by the district attorney's office. But I just want you to know that you're not in danger. No one is in danger at this point. We have all that we need to conduct the investigation, and it's currently being done. And when the results of that come back and it's finalized, then we'll be able to share more details with you. So I know that that's the worst thing I can do, because then in your minds all these questions are conjured up and you want to ask. But honestly, beyond that, I can't answer. I would not want to do something that would compromise the investigation. Having said that, some of the topics that we're talking about, there was a homeless encampment. It's RV storage, where you guys had RVs and they were getting broken into. We made, I want to say, one arrest or two arrests. One arrest, our officers went out there and ran them. And anytime somebody has warrants, we're now booking everybody that we find. There's no more, we're not issuing tickets anymore. Now, you're welcome. That's a huge cost, but we're doing that because issuing the citation arrest was not creating a deterrent. It's expensive to do what we do. Now they're booked, they're in and out in 120 minutes because they're not charges that we can hold them on. But the process of booking them tends to be irritable, and people don't like it. And when we do it, many times it causes either the behavior to change or they move along, and that's what we're doing. So, and we do that with everybody. So I know it's being recorded. We're not treating one group of people different from everybody else. Everybody gets booked. That's the standard. Now, when I say that, are there exceptions? Yes. The exceptions are, for example, the shooting last night tied up everybody on duty. So if somebody called us and said, hey, I have a homeless guy in my backyard that I want arrested because he's got a tent back there, we'll probably deal with that the next day. Not going to deal with it in the middle of a shooting incident. Does that make sense? For example, today we have 2 officers and a sergeant working, 33,000 people. So you can imagine they run from call to call. So now that staffing's going up, by the way. We are hiring people, training people, and that the city council's approved more staffing. So that's occurring. And on other shifts, late shifts, which is where we put more officers because crimes tend to be more violent at night. Generally speaking, violent crime more often happens during the dark hours because bad guys don't want to be seen. So we increase staffing there. But we also have a new homeless liaison officer. Her name's Officer Vaca. She came to us from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. She's very good. And so anytime we have an encampment or a problem, we're coming out, running them, booking them. We're exchanging shopping carts for trash bags so they don't steal all the shopping carts, which they do. And so it's a process, but we are now doing more and more to help the situation as much as we can do legally. Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. It's an arrest. They're just not held. Absolutely. Yes. And I will say this, and that made me think of another point, because I had somebody ask me, they're like, well, what if your officers don't respond appropriately and they're not doing the booking? Call me. We'll deal with it. So unless there's a valid reason, then we will make sure that we're doing that. So yes, there is a record. There's a report made. It's an arrest. Yes. Yes.
Dory, just 1 second, please. You need to use a mic, so if you want to come up here, you need to use a mic because it's being recorded and people can't hear you.
I was told, ooh, that is loud, that if you have a prowler or a homeless person in your backyard or whatever, you're not to call security, you're to call 911. If you're so sparsely manned right now, how long do you think it's going to take you to get from Banning into Sun Lakes to save me?
Well, that's right, and that's an appropriate question. If we're free, we come. That's why we want you to call 911 first. So, those individuals are coming. We have 2 more coming in next week to strengthen the shifts. So, yes, it may take a minute. But if it's a crime in progress, they will divert from whatever they're doing. And if they're not available, RSO from that's in the area, Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and the Beaumont Police Department will respond. If our officers are all tied up in something and you have a crime in progress, a prowler, you will get a police response. And so you know, and I think you should be excited about this, Beaumont used to have a radio system that was called Erica. We were on PSEC with county and most of the agencies in Riverside County. Well, Beaumont and about 3 or 4 other agencies in Riverside County had a different system called Erica. So a Banning officer could stand on this side of Highland Springs and a Beaumont officer on that side, and they couldn't talk on the radio. They had to yell at each other. Now, they could patch them together, but it was difficult and it didn't work well. Well, today, not today, but it's in the recent couple months, Beaumont has switched over to PSEC, which is the county radio system. So now Banning, Beaumont, RSO are all on the same radio. So when you talk about response time, it goes up. So if there's a crime in progress, you have a prowler, you will have officers show up. They will get there. And please call. I cannot tell you how many people send me emails. In fact, one was on Facebook this week. Homeless guy using our water and doing all this, and the police never came. Well, we were never called. We were never called. So I personally went to that business the next day and talked to the owner and said, he goes, yeah, you were called. I go, well, did you call? Well, no, but somebody called. I go, look, here's the phone records. By the way, every single phone call that's made to our dispatch center, whether it's the non-emergency line or the emergency line, it's all recorded. And everything you say on there is recorded. So if someone tells me they called and it's not there, they didn't call. Because if you just pick up a phone and call the non-emergency line, that's recorded. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Virginia Cervantes. I'd like to know with this new staffing, are they also going to retrain some of the people that do answer the phones of dispatch? Because when my items were stolen on the side of my house, propane tank and et cetera, I was told, excuse me, do you have receipts for those? And I was like, receipts? I mean, that would be the last thing on my mind. But that was a year ago or so. I want to know, are people going to start getting retrained to know that, to listen to somebody first and to understand that to us elderly people, that propane tank is just as important as, you know, them breaking into the house or what have you. It might be a little item, but still.
I agree with you, but I'm going to ask you a hard question.
Yes.
Did you send me an email and say they didn't ask you that it wasn't appropriate?
You're right, I didn't.
Okay, so I'm not calling her out. What I'm telling you is, if we don't respond the way you think we should, I need to know about it so that I can address that, right? I've been married 35 years, and I'm sure some of you have been married longer than I have. You got to address an issue now. 35 years ago, no, it's on the website, and I will give you a business card, but it's mhamner@banningca.gov. M, as in Mary, Hamner, M-N, Hamner, @banningca.gov. If you want a business card, I'll give you one, but my email is on the city website. You bet.
Thank you for being here. My name's Linda Spalding, and I live on the north side. And I feel right now that for us who live on the north side, it really is not safe for us. I have called the Banning police, and actually I called them Sunday because someone put a ladder against our wall so they could come over directly into our back, on the golf course, into our backyard. Dispatch said that she didn't have anyone available at that time, but on Monday, Officer Vaca did come out and remove the ladder. But I just want you to see this fire was also, a propane tank was blown up. It might have been Virginia's. But
When was this?
That was about 9 months ago, maybe.
Oh, 9 months,
But,
okay.
but I want you to have this as a record. We did call this in also.
I'm sure we came out on that, right? Okay.
Oh, definitely, that,
I'm looking at this great big fire, and I'm like, surely. Thought she was going to tell me we didn't come out.
and then what we are having problem with on the golf course is that they are cutting the fence, and Mark goes out, repairs, they cut. He repairs, they cut. I don't know what you can help us with as far as that goes. And this is, there's the ladder. They moved it. But on this side of the street, I was witness to a drug deal. They drove on the freeway, the 10, the whole wired fence is down. They crossed the railroad tracks. We took a picture of his license plate. It was a burgundy Lexus, and we called it in. They know who he is, and they said to me, "We know who he is." I said, "Can you come and do something?" And he said, "No, they won't let us go down there because we're getting flat tires." Honest to goodness, that's what he told me.
I'm going to say this again. Did you email me that?
Well, I called it into dispatch, you know,
You email me.
I will write all this up and email it to you.
Well, no, I mean current. I mean, not something that happened a year ago, but how long ago they tell you they wouldn't go down there because they get flat tires?
That was last week?
That was about less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well, see, and the dispatch said that on the dispatch line. So whatever
You're
the
gonna go
dispatcher
back?
says is also recorded. So if you say, "Hey, I called at 4:55 p.m. on March 6th, and your dispatcher said officers won't come here because they get flat tires," I want that because I will pull that call and I will address it. So that
I
will
can-
be addressed. That is not true.
I
We'll
can
pay
get
for
you-
tires.
I can get you the specific date that we did call
you
in,
do-
and I have it, and I have the picture of the license plate number. I mean, we're really trying, I think, on the north side, because we really are afraid,
Send it to me.
you know, and we're putting up motion detectors, we're trying to put up cameras. We had a branch that fell down, he hid under the branch, we called, officer did come out, and they said, "Yeah, we know who he is," and they just...
No, that's
So,
unacceptable.
we really need your help on the north side.
So here's what needs to happen. I don't want to go back 9 months because that's probably something it's going to be hard to address. Lori?
Linda Spalding.
Sorry. No, you're fine. I just want to make sure I say your name properly. Her example's good. She didn't call. Now she is. Linda did call and got an answer. It's just not true. We'll drive anywhere. I don't care if it gives us flat tires. So I want that date and time of that call and pull it. And to your point, the dispatcher will be, what's the politically correct term? Retrained. That is not true. The city can pay for a flat tire and we can plug a flat tire. We're going to go. I took that truck, so I get confused with directions here, but behind here where that wall is, when you get in that big field, I mean hundreds of acres field, We went down the road, and we have a four-wheel drive truck that has very thick tread, probably won't get a flat tire, and we drove it all the way in, and I saw them. We probably counted 100 shopping carts back, I mean on those hundreds of acres. There are structures in those big ravines. They're huge. I'm talking like 40-foot deep ravine. We meet them. There's two, I call them houses. You can call them what you want, but there's two shelters or houses, and they're like, yeah, we got a front room and a living room, and over here, and they got people living there in this ravine. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars to pull all that out of there and load it and take it and dismantle it. And I don't know where they're getting power, and there's nothing to get power unless they're hooked up to some power line I'm not seeing. So please call me. If the response you get is unacceptable, email me. Please.
I will email this to you, but that's the license plate number. It was June 13th. This is the drug deal going down.
And you called on June 13th?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember kind of what time?
Yes, that's right there, 1:45.
Perfect. Send it to me.
Okay.
You have my email. Okay. Oh, these are mine. Oh, good. That's going to change things. That's going to change things. That's how we do it. You know, my mom used to say, you know how you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So we're going to start, and we're going to make sure you do feel safe. I want to make sure that when you call the police, you get the kind of response you expect. And if you're not, then we retrain.
That's probably the best thing you told us today.
Okay, I'm done. Drop the mic. You're done. I'm out. I'm going to get cut off here in a minute anyway. It's 1:19. Do you have other questions or concerns for me that you'd and please call when you're afraid that you're not going to get the response you should. Don't let that factor in. Call 911 and say, hey, we've got a guy here. I've heard that we've got homeless people taking showers in your showers. That should be called immediately. Call us immediately. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you need a mic.
Oh. Please come up here. You need to come over here.
How many officers did you say are on duty during the day?
Well, sometimes, like today, we have now we have we have detectives and
No, but how many officers are
right
on
now,
the
2
street?
uniform officers and a supervisor, so there's
And
3.
that is it for the city of Banning during
That is
the day?
correct. That is correct. Now, we have officers in training that will fill those slots. We're going to get to 5. We're not there yet.
Then we'll only have 5 for the whole city?
Oh, yeah, and that's huge. They haven't had 5 in 15 years.
And why is that?
Cost.
How many do we have on 3 to 11 shift or the night shift?
They will have sometimes 4, sometimes 5.
What do we have now?
4 and 5 right now on the late shift.
Wow.
The day shift, the reason we have 1 and 2 is because we'll have the detective bureau, we'll have 4 officers. Now, they're in plain clothes, they're in, they're not in a uniform, but they can come out. You may have an on-duty, the homeless liaison officer. So if you add that today, then we would have 3 and a sergeant. Does that make sense? But she's assigned homelessness and the mental health. So we have a car that responds to mental health. So when I say 2 and 1, that's to take calls. Now, can she help? Yes. We have 2 SROs now. So when school starts, they're supposed to be working the schools. So let me put this in perspective so you just don't go off and go 2 and 1. There are 2 SROs, Corporal Hodege and Officer Nieto, but they're being paid for by the schools, not by city taxes, but, school resource officer, I'm sorry. So you'll have 2 school resource officers, you'll have the 2 officers and the sergeant working, you'll have the homeless liaison officer. So if you add that up, you're going to have homeless, 2 SROs, 2 patrol officers, the sergeant, a sergeant 6. But remember, the SROs don't answer the calls for service, so if you call it a prowler, they're not coming. Not unless we're short and no one can respond, but that's during the day shift hours. That's why I staff up the late shift. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that we don't want just 2 officers working late shift because they have nobody else that can come except other departments. So we staff them up to 4 and 5 during the day because we have the homeless Liaison, the 2 SROs. There's 3 more uniforms that if it's required, they can come and respond and help the other ones. Now, they shouldn't because they have particular tasks they're performing, but we have a fatal accident like we just had on Ramsey just a few weeks ago. Somebody died, they crashed into the guardrail there. Those officers are going to be tied up. So that's when we'll pull the SROs, we'll pull the homeless advocate, we'll pull these other people to help answer a call of a prowler because the other 3 are tied up on Ramsey with a fatal accident. Does that make it a little more clear for you? I would agree.
We're not going to take any more questions. I'm sorry, Chief, I didn't mean to interrupt
No, you're
you.
fine.
Mark Schleiden needs to make a little announcement.
Hello all, and once again, thanks Chief for everything. I will say in the 10 years that I've been on property, round of applause for the Chief. Once again, I will say in the 10 years that I've been on this property, the relationship that we have with the Benning PD, that they have with our community patrol, Securitas at this time, it's never been better. The Chief has made huge strides in the last, I'll say the last 6 months. So things are on the right path. It'll never be 100% right. He deals with issues with laws and with finances, as well as Sun Lakes itself. So we're working together. It's never been better. With that being said,
he gets a free lunch.
yeah. See you, Chief. Also, Securitas, we are having some staffing issues at this time with COVID going through their department and staff as well. And on the last note, I know we hear rumblings about the community patrol. I hear it on a daily basis. I hear praise and I hear failures. In 2 weeks, on the 16th, we will be sending out an RFP, which is a request for proposal, to 11 other vendors with the community patrol. That'll go out on the 16th, so we will be accepting bids for further service. And we will keep you posted, as will the board, on what that entails and what we end up seeing. I will tell you, a lot of the companies out there are not able to service a community this size. So it limits, we're sending out to 11, 12 vendors, but in reality, there's probably 1 or 2 that are able to service the size of a community. So keep you posted. Thanks for everything, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. Her name is Lupe Valdez. She is a Senior Director of Public Affairs for Union Pacific Railroad, Arizona, Southern California, and Southern Nevada. Ms. Valdez is a USC graduate. Her career spans 20-plus years. She is publicly recognized for her work in helping the railroad improve its image and provide union officials with a better understanding of the problems plaguing the area she serves. She is a recipient of the Most Outstanding Woman of the Year award from the League of Railroad Industry Women. She serves on numerous boards throughout Arizona, Southern California, Southern Nevada. She currently holds the title of Commissioner with the City of Montebello Traffic and Safety Commission. Again, I want to say, if you have any questions for her, she's going to do a presentation first, and then you can ask questions. You must come up to the podium because it is being televised. So I would like to introduce Ms. Valdez.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it is a little loud here. Just to give you a little bit of background of who I am, because I know there'll probably be a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to cover. I will say I've been with the railroad 17 years, which I've never been at any one employer 17 years, so I have a lot of public transit experience, air quality experience, and now, unfortunately, homeless experience as well, which I never envisioned happening in my career. I'm going to start by saying that the railroad has some really unique, challenging features. This issue with homelessness, from my perspective, really started to develop into some massive issues for us probably about 5 years ago, where we saw it really start to grow in areas we had never seen it before. Normally, the complaints I used to get, horn complaints, vegetation complaints. Those were kind of the two top community-related complaints that I would get. A lot of people never understood why the trains had to sound the horn 24/7. They didn't understand, and they also wanted to complain about vegetation that was growing out of control. I would say we've had homeless. For those of you that remember, the name used to be, at one point, hobos. This is a whole different ballgame, whole different ballgame. For the most part, and I'm not saying it was legal because it was illegal then, people would jump on the train to get to some location and jump off even though they were endangering their lives. What I am seeing today is not that phenomenon at all. And we actually hired a nonprofit community outreach outfit. It's out of Orange County, but it does what I call street outreach. Because I needed to figure out, who are these people? Why do they come onto the railroad? What creates the attraction for them to come on the railroad? Because I really had to understand that data, number one. Number two, in California, many of you may not know, and I have to be real honest with you, about every 24 to 48 hours, I get a fatality notice. And that could be a person doing something around the gate arms that they shouldn't have done, illegal, running or thinking they can beat the train. That can be someone in a mental health episode that decides to lay down on the tracks and go to sleep. It can be someone that is on some kind of narcotic that clearly they don't know where they're at. And it's very, very sad on those last two, because obviously we could have prevented that fatality. Whenever a fatality happens, we have to stop the train tracks. I have to wait for a coroner to get there. I have an investigation. And as the police chief was talking about, it takes your resources away because you have to stop everything until you can deal with that. In California, I also have a lot of Amtrak service that runs on UP. And obviously it doesn't run here as far as Banning, but I also have Metrolink service that runs into Riverside from Los Angeles. So any of those areas are unfortunately prone to fatalities. So it's a huge issue. We're working together with various agencies. Lately, we started the National Suicide Prevention Hotline has now a new number of 3 digits, and I don't want to say the number because I can't recall it right off the bat, but you're going to see a lot of promotion, because I would say a good 1/4 of the people that are fatalities are suicides, in California at least. I can't speak for other states, but I can speak for California. So that's a huge issue for us as well. But the homeless increase has also, we've seen it also move up the fatality notices that we're getting here in California, which are very, very sad and not something that we want. And at the same time, we tend to find it difficult to prevent some of these issues. You try your best. I will tell you, and I wish the chief was still here, Banning's police department has been phenomenal. When he mentioned the shopping carts, one of the officers called, we had 60 carts on our property that we didn't know how to move. They actually took care of moving the carts, and I took care of the cleanup along the encampments. Now, the other thing that you're going to need to understand, and I know many folks will think this is insane, but we live in California, and there's some rules and laws that we have to follow. When I get called on an encampment, I cannot just go out there and remove them unless there is a dangerous situation that's happening. I have to give them a notification, believe it or not, even though they are illegally trespassing on private property. I have to give them a notice and tell them within 72 hours I'm going to come to clean it up, and if they don't remove their belongings, we will throw them away. I do not keep belongings. Some agencies are forced to do that. I don't have the resources to keep their stuff. So all I can do is notice them, outreach to them, see if there's any viable opportunities for them to get into some kind of shelter or some kind of housing. I can't force them. The hardest part in California is I used to be able to say, get service or go to jail. Can't do that anymore. I used to be able to cite them, misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor, illegal trespass in California, a misdemeanor cite. But what happens is our officers get caught up in doing the paperwork, and the person walks in and walks out. And so all I've done is put my officer in an administrative roll for 3 hours of his day or her day, and that just doesn't help. So we no longer cite. We used to have more traction by citing because people didn't want to get citations, especially if they had criminal records and were on probation. That used to be they did not want to get a ticket from the railroad. Doesn't matter anymore. The misdemeanor issue is no longer what it used to be, I'll say 10 years ago. And again, those are the laws in California. We abide by them, even though we disagree with some of the issues, because again, many of these folks, for me at least, have mental health issues and have substance abuse issues, if not a combination of both. The majority of people that we find on the railroad are not necessarily your recently unhoused, unsheltered individuals. They are not the people living in cars, for the most part. They are not the ones living in trailers or mobile homes. They are folks that have been on the street for at least 5 to 10 years. They go to the railroad because it's a place where they can hide. It may not be visible from the street and or the freeway. And for the most part, the railroad has left them alone, not because we wanted to, but because we didn't get to clean up that encampment. So what we're trying to do is focus in on the areas where we have a problem, but we work with the local law enforcement. And like I said, the city of Banning and Beaumont as well, but the city of Banning has been really helpful when we coordinate it, because we realize it doesn't help if I go out and clean it up and the folks are next door on another property. They'll come right back onto me. We play a game of whack-a-mole sometimes in terms of these cleanups, which is really sad because, by the way, these cleanups, I can't get your average company to go out there. Our crews don't touch this stuff for a good reason. I need to hire hazmat crews out there because I will have needles and I will have biohazard. So, I mean, the situation is such that we just don't have to hire specialized cleanup crews that can clean the area safely and ensure that no one gets hurt. COVID created a whole issue for us. We were still able to do cleanups, but the challenge during COVID that we still have today is crews would go out. If I got one person infected, all of a sudden the whole crew would be out on quarantine. And that kept happening to me as we would plan these cleanups. That's happening less and less. Even though we get it every once in a while, but we're in the same boat that the city of Banning is in hiring police officers. You would not believe how hard it is to find good PD officers. We have peace officers for UP. I don't have a lot in California, but we're trying to hire 5 more. I have about a group of 15 that handle a huge area, but they have never had to handle the kinds of issues they're handling today. I mean, it's a whole new world for law enforcement on the mental health, on the drug issue, and on homelessness. It's just, we've never dealt with this kind of issue before. Our police officers were used to dealing with cargo theft, which has also become a problem, and other railroad-related issues, not crime in the community in this way. So we're working on that as well, but what I do want to say is the city, we have to work cooperatively with the city to make sure when we do these things, we can also give, and it depends on the city, we can also give Banning a right of entry, which means just for trespassing, not for cleanup. They can go in and remove a person or individuals that are on private property. We have that ability. We hold each other harmless, but we have that ability to do that with the city. And I will talk to the city and see if they're interested in it. Again, it's only to remove the person, but I know if I don't remove the belongings, they'll be right back. I know this. It happens to us all the time. So we have to make sure to try to coordinate as best as possible removal as well as removal of whatever things are left behind that they don't want. But like I said, shopping carts has been a big issue here. I saw several as I drove by. I saw 2 or 3 in more smaller size encampments. So I'll get those reported to our staff. I do have a phone number that I will share with Lois and both of you to make sure that you get that number out. Reporting is important because that's how we look at the data and the stats. I know people hate to say that, but it's really important because that's how I can make an effort for more resources going toward a problem, because we didn't have that. When I first started 17 years ago, that was not an issue I had in Banning or Beaumont or anywhere along Riverside. I had it in Los Angeles. I did not have it out here. But now every community I'm in, every single community, and I'm in Oprah's backyard in, in Montecito, and I'll tell you, I have a huge problem in Santa Barbara and Montecito. Huge. And it's because of the beach, and it's because of our great weather, and it's because there's places where people can live outside, and we're not in Omaha, Nebraska, in January. So it's very different out here. But the laws also are really challenging out here. So one, I will make sure you all have the number to report it on any homeless. We have had cargo theft issues. I want to let everyone know, again, how am I involved in all of this stuff? I'm working with all the local law enforcement agencies in Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Riverside. Some of the groups are infiltrating, pretending to be homeless. They are not. And stealing stuff from trains. They throw boxes over from wherever they can, and they completely risk their lives. Throw boxes over, someone picks it up and hides it in a tent, or they threaten the homeless individual, hide it until we come back later and pick it up. It's just, I've never seen it to this degree, but I've also seen that the laws also, what I feel, and this is my personal opinion, is that the consequences don't seem to be there for some of these folks, and that really drives me nuts. I understand we need reform, I get that, but I'm really feeling like there's a lot of fewer consequences for people that commit crime than there used to be across the board. This is not just, I will tell you one other case that we had actually. It was in San Bernardino. These folks decided to steal, we're the largest carrier of beer in the region. We do a lot of beer bottles and a lot of beer sales and a lot of beer movement. They knew there was a beer train, apparently. They knew where it parked. And unfortunately, the containers, we don't own the containers or the locks. That is done by the customer. So I can work with the customer to try to ramp up the locks, but these folks can buy or steal something from Home Depot or Lowe's, and they can pretty much cut something in like 15 minutes. They can torch it. They can do all kinds of stuff. And so these folks stole, I don't know how many cases of beer, but the van that they used was not, beverage companies know you need to have a fortified van for putting any kind of bottles in your trunk. We don't chase people either on the police side. Local law enforcement can do that. We do not chase people. We will take down licenses, we will report it, but we don't chase. Well, the local law enforcement decided to chase. These folks lost control of the car. They were both young. They were both killed because the beer crushed them in the accident. Again, all for beer. 2 people lost their lives. So, I am seeing things today that I can tell you I've never ever seen before. So I want to leave time for Q&A, but one, reporting is important. Understand that we have processes we need to follow to notify people that they need to leave. We can't just we've been sued on this issue. We've been sued for lost things that no one can tell me if they actually ever had a diamond ring that was valued at $20,000. I don't know. But we've been sued on these types of issues. So we have to follow a process. We try to outreach to them. If we can connect them with family, we connect them with family out of state. It doesn't matter. We will give them a ticket to go back home if they want to go back home and there's a family member willing to receive them. If they're a veteran, there's a lot of services for veterans. And so we try to connect them with services. But we can't force them. The hardest part here is I can offer them a number of things that they may or may not want, but I cannot force them to take service or take a hotel room, et cetera, which is, it handicaps all of us because we're not able to get them to the next step. And that's just a baby step. That's not getting them into recovery. That's not getting them into, a permanent housing situation, but it's a step. And it's what all communities across the board are dealing with this, as I've talked to many communities on what we can do. But the community here has been phenomenal at partnering with UP, especially when we have these issues of the shopping carts and some other issues where they're hidden behind areas that are off the beaten path. So we'll continue to work with PD. I will see if they want a right of entry, because again, it's just permission, and it allows them, even though folks are illegally there, it allows the PD to be there legally there in terms of access for just removal. not for any other issue. Police can always go onto our property chasing a suspect or doing any kind of, narcotics bust. That doesn't stop. Any police can go onto property for that. But in this case, with trespassers, I call them trespassers, they're homeless, or individuals who choose to be somewhere. We've had the same theft issues. We are doing a number of things. Unfortunately, just to let you know, underneath the railroad tracks, 9 times out of 10, I may have utility fibers, etc. So I can't put bougainvillea. The ideas we've tried. The fence, we have even tried the reinforced metal fence. They will torch that. They have torched that. So we don't even deal with chain link anymore, but even that has to be repaired over and over. We have tried 2-ton boulders that are very expensive. Who knew rock would be so expensive? Just to see if I could, and I did it in one location to stop them from driving onto the right-of-way. Again, extremely dangerous. And so far that seems to be working, but it doesn't stop the homeless from climbing over them. It just stops my driver from driving in an area that he or she shouldn't be in. Lights and music, loud music and lights, I have to be real careful because I have engineers and I cannot blind them. They work 24/7, and a light, they're higher up in a cab, and I can't do anything that can not give them a line of sight issue. So a lot of people have said, what about lights? What about noise? And again, noise carries to the residents. So you have to be careful on some of these ideas because it may not work for the community that has to listen to it. And I have to make sure I have the engineer as able to see the whole right-of-way as possible from the cab and stop a train if needed. This is Mainline Traffic. Someone asked about how do we repair. This is Mainline, which is like our freeway, because it has so many trains going through from east to west and west to east. So we are constantly inspecting the track at all times. We have a geometry cart. It looks like a weird car, but it's a geometry cart that actually analyzes the wear and tear on the rails. Because we carry heavy loads on this route, it is done on a regular basis, like on a 30-day basis. But in between that, I have track inspectors that look at because of our weather, sun kinks, we're in sun kink time. So, and now other parts of the country are experiencing the hot weather. During hot weather, I have the potential of sun kink. So that puts us into another priority area in terms of inspecting the railroad tracks themselves. And then what I also have out here is earthquakes. If there is anything above a 4.0, we have different protocols, both railroads do, BNSF and UP, where we stop all operation and we inspect from 50 miles from the epicenter out. We haven't had a big one lately in a long time. It's been a few years since I've done that, but understand that things will stop completely until inspections are done on any major earthquake that happens 4 point and above. But sun kinks right now is my big challenge in hot weather, and it's something that we have to continually inspect for. So they are regularly inspected because of that on the track physical bed itself. We replaced rail out here a few years ago, and it's doing really well. We're using concrete ties as opposed to wood ties, and they're good in some cases, they're not great in others, but infrastructure is our life because it's our safety, and it's what we need to do in terms of ensuring. The ports have been really backed up lately. I think there's 17 ships out at sea trying to unload. There's congestion issues, so you're gonna see a lot of activity. I don't think we'll see it calm down until, to be quite frank, 2023, assuming we don't go through more COVID up and downs. Who knew everyone was gonna order online when COVID hit? No one anticipated this growth that we had on everyone ordering everything online, and we didn't anticipate that. So right now, all ships are completely booked around the world. This is not just Southern California or United States, around the world, the ships are booked solid. And so we're not seeing a more rise because everything's at max amount. And what you're seeing right now are probably products coming in for Christmas. That's what happens during July and August is retailers get Christmas supplies, and there's a lot of backlog in between. So we'll continue, monitoring that and working our way through that. But we've had staffing issues as well. We're in a union negotiation, just really quickly, so like everyone else, I know the ports of LA and Long Beach just, I think, almost finalized their agreement with ILWU. We have 12 unions in 23 states. So when we go to negotiations, every railroad in the United States negotiates at the same time, which is kind of unique in the industry. You know, I came from a bus company where you did that every 3 years, but I didn't do it for the rest of the state. I just did it for the MTA at the time. But so we are negotiating now. It's gotten to a cooling off period with the president calling for a cooling off period, which means a mediator is coming in to mediate. We're hoping for resolution on that, but it's still going to be a touch and go situation. But basically, they can't strike. Once the president calls it, they can't strike. They need to work through the resolution, and there's several steps that we have to go through, and that's what we're in right now on the union side. So I just wanted to give you kind of a capsule of other things that are going on in the rail industry beyond homelessness, but also just to give you an idea of this industry is just changing and moving in ways that I just never saw before. And so we'll continue to probably run long trains. You will see that in terms of efficiency, double stack trains, which again are efficient, but some of my trains replace 500 trucks. If I didn't have that double stack train, it would be 500 trucks on the road. So, I mean, if you really think about that, that's a big deal. While I realize it's an impact to folks, it would be, I think, a much more challenging impact here in Southern California, knowing what we experience every day on the roads. And so I think there's more things to come on that, but that kind of gives you an idea of kind of the world that I live in and the kinds of things that are going on. So I want to give time for questions and answers. Sorry. I didn't mean to be too long-winded.
No, that was perfect.
Okay.
That was great. It gave
Okay.
a lot of information. Linda? Again, remember, you need to come up to the podium, and if you just want to come along the side
That's
here.
perfect.
Come over here because it's being recorded.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. You are brilliant. I didn't know you needed to know all that stuff.
There's more than you probably wanted to know, but I'm sorry.
No, I think it gives us a great appreciation for what you are dealing with. I have a few questions, and I'll try to keep them brief, but about 6 months ago, I'll say, again, on the north side,
Right.
the railroad track is right behind us, on hole number 4, where their fence is completely taken down. It's a chain link. 12 men jumped out of a car. So now, who do we contact? We can't contact you, and then, of course, by the time we contact the police, they're probably all gone.
Right.
But maybe we should have some kind of
Right. information
on what
Right.
to do. And then you said, give Banning the right of passage.
Right.
Why don't they have that already?
It's a right of entry. They have it for an emergency. They're chasing a suspect. They're something related to safety. The Federal Railroad Administration requires any non-railroad person to have a permission to be on railroad property. And that's kind of a national thing. That's not a UP thing. And it's just tied to the way the world used to work. So that right of entry, it's just an agreement between UP police and Banning police that they can go onto property for removing a trespasser.
So
Strictly for that.
our board president happens to be her husband. So can we have our board president contact Matt Hammer
Sure.
to get that? Because
Sure.
he would like the back of our area patrolled really on a nightly basis.
Sure.
And
We
so
can
that
do
sounds
that.
to me what is needed.
Right.
And then I know you said you'd give the number to Lois and Michelle, but we are recording it, so
Okay.
maybe you can give it.
And I
then-
will. I'll give it right now as soon as
And
you.
then the fence I'm talking about on the chain link fence along the golf course, we were told we shouldn't touch it because it is railroad property. Is that something you can give permission for Sun Lakes to continue to repair, or are we trespassing?
Let me check, because I don't know. 9 times out of 10, a lot of things with fencing, especially chain link, they're put there either by verbal agreement, or it was done when this was Southern Pacific. This used to be Southern Pacific territory, not Union Pacific. We merged in 1996, but there is still a lot of Southern Pacific information on every map I've ever seen. So there could have been at one point an agreement to do that. I don't know. So what I'll do is I will check to see if we have anything on record with that fence We can also give the Sun Lakes community, we can also look to see if we can do an agreement or something that gives you the authority to repair it if needed. But first, let me find out who the owner is, because ownership is critical, and I have these in all places. Ownership is critical, and then see if there was ever an agreement. Sometimes there are agreements with fences, sometimes there are not. It just depends.
Because I think the board is talking about getting away from the chain link fence because it's so easily.
It's too easy to cut.
So so that would probably be part of the conversation.
Right.
And then I'm going to hold Michelle accountable to get that information.
Well, I mean,
You'll
I've tried.
follow up. I know you will.
I don't like to use double reinforced metal that I use because it's really ugly. If you touch it, you can cut your fingers. But I do that for a reason, because I do it for a reason. I don't like to use barb because, again, it feels like a prison. Unfortunately, folks put towels over the barbed wire. So let me tell you, but that's something that we could look at least to find out if there's ownership information on the fence itself. And then I'll repeat, for the recording, let me repeat the number. And this is a 24/7 emergency number for Union Pacific Railroad. There is someone staffing it on Christmas Day, on Thanksgiving Day, on 4th of July. We don't close. And that, it's a toll-free number too, so it is a free, you don't get charged for calling, because it does dispatch out of Omaha, Nebraska. And that number is 888 877 7267. And I'll say it again, 888 877 7267. I feel like I'm calling bingo numbers, but it's not bingo. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nellie, and I'm talking about the June 15th incident.
I can tell you about
was on my way to a doctor's appointment.
Mm-hmm.
I take Sun Lakes Boulevard. My appointment was at 3:15 in Redlands. I left my house at 2:30, taking Sun Lakes Boulevard to California Avenue. That's how I usually get on the 10.
Right.
I saw that the traffic was slow. I saw the train stopped at Pennsylvania Avenue.
Right.
I get to California Avenue and it's the same thing.
Right.
I have to go back to Beaumont Avenue to get on the freeway. Everything was stopped.
Gridlocked.
I tried to call your number, couldn't get through. I called the local CHP. The dispatcher said, I told her what was going on. She didn't know. She says, that's a Beaumont PD problem. Why did nobody know what was going on?
Right.
It was a hot day, one of the hottest day of the month.
Right.
My air conditioning was barely going because I was stop and go, 2 miles per hour.
Right.
Finally, I got to Beaumont Avenue, got on the freeway.
Right.
Luckily, my doctor took me an hour and a half later.
Right.
It wasn't fair to people that lived on this side. What if there was an emergency? How could they get to the Sun Lakes residence?
Right.
Everything was stopped.
Right.
People were having road rage in front of me, coming out of the Jack in the Box.
Oh, yeah.
It was awful.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and let me explain what happened, because I was actually with the city of Beaumont yesterday as we're kind of figuring out how this situation got to be where it was, but also some initial good information that we have, and this goes back to calling that number. The more information you can give that emergency person, location, people, how many homeless, a train is stopped blocking a hospital, blocking, you have to, because they don't always know how bad it was. Now, mind you, the weird part for me, I was stuck at an airport in Fort Worth. So I get the call from Beaumont, and I'm like, what do you mean the train is out there? So I'm calling my operations people. I missed my plane because I can't get on the plane and talk to them at the same time. So I delayed my flight, and this was for work, this wasn't for fun, but what we found out was we had a big failure in communication. It was a huge failure in communication because they had no idea how many crossings were blocked by that train. What happened with the train is it went into PTC emergency. Positive train control is what we have on all of our trains now, going back from an incident in Chatsworth that some of you unfortunately may remember.
Yes.
PTC was then required, but when PTC goes into failure, for whatever reason, it stops the train because it means it can't prevent a head-on collision. That's what happens with PTC. The crew timed out. My crews cannot be on the train more than 12 hours. They have to jump off. Different than a bus. For bus, it's 10 hours, but they can still move the bus after 10 hours. I get a huge fine if our crews are on for more than 12 hours. They cannot be on for 12 hours, which is, I know, it's railroad law. And so it really created a problem. But because we didn't know the urgency of it, what we could have done, which we didn't do, we could have, which is not great, but it's better than nothing, break up the train. Break it. Break it so at least one of those streets, Pennsylvania, et cetera, someone got through. So, I mean, again, that's your option of last resort. But then the backup crew got stuck in the same traffic you were stuck in. So then we pulled it, then we thought we were going to put a train on and just push it out. I mean, because again, you're looking at all the variables because we couldn't get a crew out there. Well, they get on the train and it had been vandalized. And once it's vandalized, because the air brakes run through the train, even though the locomotive is the power, the inspector has to check the whole darn line of that train to make sure that the air brakes work, which took long, which wasn't helpful. But I think the initial thing we have learned, and again, we're looking at our protocols to double check, because there's I can't remember if I was looking at my notes, because they just told me yesterday, there's a planned closure Caltrans is having on one of your off-ramps right here that I got off on to come here for like, right now it's August 8th through the 18th. Make sure, they've changed that date, and that's been the concern of Beaumont. They've changed the date.
Okay.
But make sure you find out, because one of those off-ramps, I can't remember if it's westbound or eastbound, is going to be completely shut down during that entire time while they redo the off-ramp. So you should know that, and again, it has changed, but make sure that you get that information, because we're worried that any train stalling there could create the havoc again. So we're working right now with Beaumont on trying to figure out and making sure our crews know that they have to clear the area at Pennsylvania, because it's going to push people onto Pennsylvania. They probably won't go to Beaumont Avenue, but they'll go to Pennsylvania, which is, again, you're going to have a choke point there anyway, without anything happening. So we're working with them on that
Okay,
one.
just my last comment, just take a close look at this, because it affected Sun Lakes. Nobody
Oh, yeah.
would have been able to come through.
Right.
Emergency, fire, ambulance, and we are not some hick town.
No.
We need to have the services.
Right.
And the train should have been uncoupled.
Right, and again, I just think that I think we've talked to several communication, and also working with the chief of Beaumont and our chief as well, so that they've been in communication as well, because again, we don't need a train stuck out here for 6 hours either. That is, you're talking $1 million an hour, guys. For a company, that is not a good thing. So it's not good for the community, but it's also not good for us on the business side of the house. But this is one we're really going into. And the congressman is also involved in this, by the way. So there are other people looking at this issue. So we're not, I don't want to tell you it's not being looked at very seriously because of kind of the failure that happened across the board. But it was the worst case scenario. Yes, sir.
I'm Bill Bess, and compared to that situation, this is minor again. I just wanted to further the conversation that Linda had on the north side. I've been playing golf here for 20 years. The area she's talking about the fence, is down by a ravine that we have there and a bridge. There has been an orange bucket there, a lawn chair, and a grill for 20 years.
Wow.
They even put an address up on the side of the tunnel that somebody was nice enough to paint. But there are about 20 carts along that railroad track. I don't know how you're going to get that stuff, who would ever get that stuff. You'd break your ankle if you'd walk in any of those rocks to get any of it.
Right, on balance.
And all the trash down by that ravine and in front of that tunnel. And there was guys living there last week, okay? I saw them there. Anyway, this is what's going on in that place, and it's been going on for a long time. It needs to be cleaned up. She has to look at it every day. I don't. Anyway, thank you.
No, you're welcome. And I'll take a look, because I don't know if the ravine is on UP property or not. It might be. So we normally we have, it's not a standard, but normally, especially in some stretches, I have 100-foot right-of-way, means that from the middle of the track, go out 50 feet, and that's what our UP property is normally. But it varies. It's not always that wide. And so I just need to make sure, because I can't go onto someone else's property either, but we can coordinate cleanups if need be. It's also very dangerous. I mean, I realize we're in drought, but if we ever have a flash flood, and I have these in Vegas all the time, and I can't tell you how many people we lose in Vegas because they live in areas that they shouldn't be in on the homeless side. So let's talk more about that location and find out where the property lines are and figure out who handles what, because that's a big deal. Yes, folks have gotten very bold. Yes, folks have put addresses on trees. I have seen it on vegetation. I have seen they dig under holes. I can't tell you the things I've seen that I think are extremely dangerous, especially in the heat. I had it up in San Bernardino as well, where they just dug a series of holes where they were living. It could have collapsed on them, killed them. So we look below ground, on ground, and above ground, unfortunately, today with this scenario. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name's Brad Hinckley. We need a little bit more planning out here. We need to be on two levels, railroad on one level and public streets on the other. And we don't have that many in this section of Beaumont and Banning. And it ties up the traffic terrible. Even the ones that are built, we have the underpass, and then it goes under the railroads and the Highway 10. And it is a major traffic problem all the time. It wasn't engineered to handle as much traffic as we're getting now. Is there anything being done on the railroad part to help alleviate underpasses or overpasses in this area particularly? Because a population, we're going to have this problem all over the state.
It's growing. One of the things that I did learn, and it's something maybe depending on the group's activity level, the city of Beaumont is currently in design phase. Now, mind you, it's just design for Pennsylvania Avenue grade separation. They're widening Pennsylvania Avenue as a city, but they're also in design, which is, the council just approved $1 million or so to finish up that design. It's going to take them about 18 months, but design is one part of this, construction is the other part. It's a $40 million project, okay, to do that grade sep. So I would say that because of some of the federal funds that are coming out now, we've said we'll write a letter of support to the city of Beaumont, but they have to, there's two agencies they need to work with. They need to work with Riverside County Transportation Authority, that's the funding planning agency for Riverside, to get that grade separation up on the high level. They're hoping to use the incident that happened on June 15th as a reason why it became such a problem for the community in terms of how it's grown out here. So that's number one. And I think, so there's local elected officials on the RCTC board. So take a look at who your local elected is. I don't know who it is in terms of who represents the area. Both County Board of Supervisors sit on that, as well as local council members. And then I would also talk to your Congress member, because they're also, earmarks are back. In the world I live in, earmarks are back. They were gone and now they're back. And so local congressional members now have the opportunity to do earmarks on projects, but it has to be a project that's identified by RCTC, by the county. And I know the city of Beaumont, I believe they're going with Banning as well, but several cities are getting together to talk about infrastructure, and this is a top one for the city of Beaumont. but it's on it would be grade separate Pennsylvania Avenue, so you would never have that problem again in terms of getting stuck by the train. So. Oh, sure. Yes, that's the one, westbound. Yes, it is westbound. The closure right now is August 8th through August 18th, westbound Highland Springs Avenue. Okay, which is just, I mean, it's awful. They say, please use Sunset Street or Pennsylvania Avenue, and Pennsylvania Avenue we know has the railroad. But that's the one that they're planning. Now, mind you, they changed the date from August 8th, it was August 1st, so just verify that it's still, because they've switched that date before. So what's a grade separation? Hold on, I want to answer that question. Grade separation when you physically take the road either above or below the railroad track. So you completely separate the conflict that exists today by getting stuck by a train. LA County has done a great bang-up job, so has San Bernardino. Riverside did, but all of a sudden has not done a lot of, they're expensive projects. These are not cheap projects. They take probably about 3 to 4 years to build. It is a pain. I know, I've been through it before many times. It is awful. At the same time, at the end of the day, you know, it is much better for traffic because you don't get stopped by a train, and no matter what happens on the train tracks, you keep going. And so that's probably, but I think Pennsylvania, to me, with all the development I'm seeing on the residential side, and again, I think what you can do to support their effort, I think will help, especially on the elected official front, because they're really going to use this situation to show what can happen when a train completely gridlocks a community that has so many commuters going through it, both east and westbound. So that's a really big deal. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Lou Lujan.
Hi.
Can you please repeat what you said about in a situation of an earthquake?
Yes.
Did you say the train would stop no matter where it is?
Normally it stops. We monitor.
Even if it's blocking streets?
It's a safety issue because one of the things that happens in an earthquake is, depends on where the epicenter is. Again, remember, we're watching, we have monitors, earthquake monitors all over. We have them at our dispatch center that we communicate with Earthquake Central, I want to say for California. But if you're in the epicenter, the last thing you need is a derailment to boot. And so, again, this is 4.0. I'm talking about a strong one. I'm not we got earthquakes all the time here, 1.1. I get reports on them all the time. But I'm talking a real shaker, and I'm talking 50 miles. And part of it is to inspect.
What do you consider a real shaker?
Anything in the 4.5 and above range, that's what I would consider.
So we're going to be stuck.
That's a possibility. That's that.
Possibility
Right.
or probability?
And we know a big earthquake will happen here. I mean, that to me, that is not a secret.
That's
and
scary.
so, the truth is that if you have the track that's split, if I have a 7.0 and the track splits, again, you don't want a derailment to boot. You don't want to add to the emergency of moving trains. I was through Northridge, I've been through Prieta Loma, I've been through Northridge, I've been through, and with the Northridge, I'll be honest with you, Northridge was a shaker. The train tracks survived just fine. They were moving, and we got to move people and product between the San Fernando Valley and the North County area where the interstate went down. But the train tracks still have to be inspected. And mind you, what happens is you don't just rely on the regular people, you pull in people from around the country to do that inspection really quick. I'd be shocked, you're surprised at how quickly we can mobilize 50 to 100 people. You pull everyone off vacation, you pull everyone that you have, and you put all able bodies, and everyone takes off to a different inspection point to look at any problems that we have on the right-of-way. We haven't had any so far from any of the previous earthquakes, but you can't guarantee that. We can't. And so I have to make sure that I don't make a situation worse. I am required by law to carry hazmat. And so the last thing I want is another emergency on the rails that doesn't need to happen. So it's preventative. But we live in earthquake country. I mean, that's just the world we live in. So we just have to make sure to, again, we monitor these things on a regular basis. Track inspectors look at it. We have earthquakes all the time. I'm getting the reports daily now in terms of what we have, but they're 1.1, 1.2. They're below 2 for the most part, some below 3. That doesn't trigger that. But a stronger earthquake, from the epicenter. So it doesn't mean the whole state of California, it means from that epicenter, 50 miles out. That's my inspection area.
First of all, I want to say thank you to you and all the people that work there on the train.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very much. I know you're all essential workers.
Right.
Getting things to and fro, it must be a very hard job. Thank you, first of all, to state that in case of an earthquake, the trains do stop.
Right.
Because if it didn't stop and kept going, I live right at the wall. Those trains would be in my kitchen. Okay? Like, that's the first thing we worried about as soon as we moved to that home. We're at the very end of where that wall is at. I always worry about the trains going fast and derailing or what have you, things like that. But I want to say thank you, and that's one of the biggest reasons.
Oh, you're welcome.
Second of all, when you mentioned that you cannot grow any foliage there by the wall, things like that, can they be able to remove that foliage? Because there's a lot of it by the wall. The homeless use those to hide items in there.
Right.
And or also, the thing is, my concern is if they start a fire right by that wall, there's bushes that touch our trees right by the golf course.
Right.
And I have pine trees right next to my home, no more than 5-6 feet away, and those things will go up like a match.
Right.
So can they be able to clean that area of that foliage, or would you have to sub that out some way or another?
Right.
But
We do use contractors. As long as it's on UP right-of-way, I can clear out the vegetation. It has to be on UP right-of-way. As long as it's on our property, I can clear out the vegetation. The harder thing to do is I can't always cut down trees. I can limb them up in case they're being used by homeless, which is happening to the east of you. And so the tamarisk trees that used to be for sand are now, unfortunately being torched by folks starting fires at the base. So I'm limbing them up because there still is sand that I tried to have a sand break from the tracks. Sand and tracks don't go well together even though we come through the desert. So that's why they're there. But if it's on our property, we can get the report in to have it cleared. Vegetation, I just can't always cut down trees. Trees are a whole different ballgame because of the equipment I need.
my husband and I, we've had a company over 40 years in desert landscaping. To let you know that you guys talked about maybe planting items there. There's a lot of cactuses that have very super small roots.
Right.
And they're very dangerous cactuses.
Right. Hint, hint.
For anybody that wants to climb over the wall.
Right. Now, just so you know, our staff wouldn't be doing that, but I have been sued by my own employees on them falling on stuff that's on the right-of-way and keeping clearances. So I have a very interesting job sometimes when your own employees sue you when they trip and fall, which I have a lot of, unfortunately. So I have to be careful with what we also don't allow for things to be watered on our property because the water in a water main line break could undermine the ballast rock that supports the track structure. Water is supposed to go away from the track, not toward the track. So pipes, et cetera, there's not. Now, there's also beautification leases that we do with cities, and I tell that in terms of as long as it's 25 feet away from the track, farthest away possible. The 25-foot rule is within 25 feet, there's nothing I can do. It's a red zone, meaning it's dangerous for anyone to be there that that's not trained. But if it's a big right-of-way and it's an edge, and there's an opportunity to do a beautification lease through the city, that normally goes through the city, it's like $500 for 5 years. That's where you can plant the cactus. That's where you could look at the cactus options. I'm not doing it, but you can look at it. Anyway, that's just another thought. Again, we realize all these things are new in the sense of we've never had these issues before. I said we had horn blowing and vegetation, but all of a sudden I have a whole different element that I'm challenged with that I just need to make sure to keep people safe. Yes?
Oh, well, yes, thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for putting this for us as well. I have concerns, and I don't know where to begin addressing to you or addressing to you. Okay, one of them to you is that how often a year, how often do you ever have a cleanup around the railroads? What's your property? And how often?
Right. We do it based on a request per basis. Normally you keep, this is Mainline, so that means they try to keep definitely 25 feet each side clear. But in California, because we have about 3,000 miles of track here, it's normally when communities call me. It's not, we don't have like a maintenance crew go out on a regular basis because our people can be pulled anywhere for any emergency. So if I have a fire, if I have something else that pulls the crew, they get pulled. So we don't have like once a month or once a year or once every 6 months. We don't have that. It's based on when communities call us.
Okay, so is that Mr. Bella the one who will be calling you and say, could you please address the cleanup from this section of the
Yes.
city of Banning to this section?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So if there's, again, it depends on if there's people or if shrubs or vegetation or dumped stuff, because we also have people that unfortunately use us to dump. So it's a combination of both, a combination of any of the above, I should say. So, and as long as it's on our property, that's the thing, that sometimes I don't always know where the property lines are, so I have to have our real estate people just verify who owns what. If it's ours, it's ours. But just I don't know if there's any other property adjacent, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I'd like to know, do we have a city council from our city here today to hear this? Okay, okay. This is an election year, and I wish that someone could, like our supervisor, all these people who are going to represent us overall in various positions, to come and for us to address our concerns that we are addressing to you as well, because we're all in it together. It's not just the railroad, and it's not just us. So, yes, I'm really concerned with the cards. When I go to the supermarket, I pick up a card and I said, who had this card? Does these cards get washed at the end of the day before they put back in the market? I think that all this has an excellent way of keeping track of the cards, because people put the quarter and bring it back and get their, we need to have something of that so that we can have control of the carts, and we need better sanitation with our golf carts, our baskets for the supermarkets. Yeah.
We can have to take that up to the supermarket.
Well, I'm talking about concerns. It's just not, baskets at the market. We have a lot of concerns to all these leaders that are for election, and I like to hear from them. Thank you very much, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Thank you. My name is Don Tunier. I have a basic question. I think I know the answer. There are no federal or state laws limiting the length of a train?
Correct. Correct. The question, normally what used to limit the length of a train normally was the sidings. Like if you had single track, if you were single tracked, and this used to be the case, if you were single tracked and trains go in both directions, you had to have the opportunity for a train to pull to the side and let another train pass if it was either running early or late or missed a meet, to make sure that so that's on single track. A lot of this now is double tracked, so there is no limit that, it's being discussed, but there is today no limit on the length of a train. So what you see sometimes is in the trains, and this is kind of more train stuff, you will see an engine in the middle, looking like it's going reverse, that it's not. It's actually helping the engine in the front be able to control a longer train, and that's called distributed power. You sometimes will see it at the back. No more cabooses. Cabooses are illegal. You won't see cabooses in the country. They're illegal. But some people still have them, but they're illegal to operate. But you will see an engine on the back, and that is doing the same thing. But normally it's in the middle. Distributed power is what it's called, and it gives the engineer a lot more control over a longer train.
I also golf on the north side, and there's
good engineers and bad engineers.
I know.
The good engineers, the golfers will go like this, and they give you a couple beeps.
I know. And just so you know, one of the other reasons an engineer has to sound the horn is if there's homeless present. Anybody, even if it were on maintenance workers, they have to whistle freely, but even for illegal trespassing, they have to blow their horn, which is a real pain when I have quiet zones in areas where, and I normally should not have to ring a horn except for a crossing at Pennsylvania, but if there's people there, he or she is required to sound that horn. It's federal and state law. Even in a quiet zone, by the way, it doesn't matter, and I've had people be really upset at that, but I mean, that's just the laws we have to abide by because there's people present. Okay? Yes.
Does every railroad crossing over a street have arms that go down?
No. Not every railroad crossing has arms, and there was a bad accident. It was on BNSF. We've had them too, so I don't want to tell you I'm pointing fingers because I'm not. There was a bad accident in, I want to say it was in Kansas, where a truck went, I don't know what the circumstances were. I don't know if he fell asleep. I don't know if he thought he could beat the train. I don't know because he was killed. Truck, and it was an Amtrak. Amtrak tends to run on us. This side of the Mississippi, Amtrak runs on either UP or BNSF. They don't own their own stuff on this part of the country. They own it up in New York to DC, but they do not own it in Boston, but they don't own it on the West Coast or west of the Mississippi. So, and that's where this whole issue came up about it had a cross buck, which is just a sign. And again, normally people respect the laws and don't try that. Whether that was the case or not, we won't ever know because the person passed away. But people were killed on the train, the Amtrak train. Oh my gosh. So, right. That they are now discussing because, and some of these areas are more remote than others. So the issue is making sure that there's electrical power on the grid and a backup battery system in case the grid goes down. We have that in California because we have a power out. Our systems go on backup power for 24 hours. And then if it's going to be extended, then we have to get a generator there to run it. But it is not mandated by law yet that every railroad crossing have the gate arms and have a more advanced railroad system. In California, you see it all the time because we're so urbanized that you don't have the crossbucks. I think the last crossbuck I took out was in the city of Colton, but it was no longer a running railroad. That portion was no longer running, so I didn't have to worry about traffic, but that was the last crossbuck I've ever had in the city of Colton. But yeah, it's not required by law.
Libby, I wanted to ask a question. On the north side, of course, most our front row here all live on the north side.
Right.
You're saying it's 25 feet that you take care of because UP owns it. Do you know who owns from that 25 feet out
Right.
to up to us?
Right, and let me just clarify, 25 feet from edge of rail is our red zone, meaning I don't want anyone within those 25 feet. Correct. I may own it, and I may own beyond 25 feet, but I need to find out where the property lines are.
Okay.
Because it could be 100-foot right-of-way out here, I don't know. I have to check with real estate to make sure. Sometimes we also have easements that we give to water companies and other utilities that may have an easement in between ours, where because of the pipe that runs underneath the ground, they have that. But I don't know if that's the case here. It might be all UP, as far as I know, but I need to check.
If it is, well, I guess if it is or if it isn't,
Right.
are then you responsible for all that cleanup?
Yes.
And then, okay, so then that 88 number
Would be
is
called.
what we would call.
Correct.
And make sure
Right.
that you're aware, someone's aware that
Right.
there's garbage, there's trash, there's
Right.
homeless. But if I'm remembering what you said correctly, you can't remove that person right away.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
I need to notify the illegal trespasser that he's illegal trespassing, and I have to give him time to leave. Normally 72 hours. And I outreach, I try, we try. I don't want them to come back. That's my whole point. I don't want them to be there to begin with. But I cannot do anything to prevent him or her from coming back because I can't fence up my right-of-way. I have a train that runs through it, so it's a real problem. So that's a challenge.
Okay.
But yeah, so, and I will ask you also to copy me on an email.
Okay.
So that way I can follow it up internally. Every week I have meetings with our staff that does homeless stuff and vegetation, 2 different groups. So I just have to make sure that I follow up with them internally as well.
And you did say you are working with Chief Hamner?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
and I will work with him to let him know about the right of entry to see if he's interested.
Okay.
Because again, it's a simple agreement, it's not,
And that's something that our board president could ask the chief and make sure that we,
If they wanna do that.
we want to get that.
right, if I want right of
Okay.
entry.
I just see him in the audience. So, does anyone have any other questions? We're all know what we're supposed to be doing now.
One more.
I think we have someone coming up, okay.
I don't usually do this stuff, though. All of us that live on the north side, there's so much trash back there, and there's nobody living there. It's just abandoned.
Just trash.
Abandoned.
Okay.
Must be 150 golf carts, stuff from Home
wow.
Depot.
Okay.
Is there any way we can get it removed?
Yes, I mean, I don't want to tell you I can do it this week, but as soon as I know that it's on our property, verify that, then I can ask the track maintenance crews to take care of portions of it. Now, mind you, some of these take multiple days because I have to dump them somewhere. If it's stuff I have to dump, shopping carts, the city's been really good about collecting them and doing whatever they do with them, so I can gather them and put them on a corner where they'll pick them up. That's how we did it last time. There was 50 of them, and so they were able to do that. So, but the other stuff gets a little bit more, if it's even for inoperable cars, I have to put a notice on saying this is going to be removed in case someone's living in it. Vehicles get a little bit dicier, but cleanup is cleanup. So yeah, as long as it's UP property, bottom line. Yes.
Hi, just one more question I forgot. I don't know if it went over or not. When those trains carry chemicals in those tanks, you know, how soon is the public alerted in case there's a leak?
That's a good question. We are required by federal law to provide transportation on hazmat as long as the customer, whoever that customer is, meets all the regulations with regard to tanks, double insulated. I mean, sometimes we carry maple syrup, but sometimes we carry toxic stuff. I'm not going to say we don't. An element that goes into beer is considered toxic because of the amount that I carry. It still goes into beer, but because of how I carry it, it's considered toxic. Chalk is considered toxic, powder chalk, because of the amount I carry. In a derailment, it could go into a river, and it could create a lot of issues. So some of these things may not be the toxic hazardous that I smell and I die issue. They might be because in an incident, they could damage a water stream or other. And so they're considered toxic for that reason too. So the customer has to inspect. We inspect at the rail yards. The closest one here is Colton. We inspect. If we find it deficient, we don't move it. We just don't move it. We've had accidents with them. I've been involved in several derailments. So far, what has spilled is diesel fuel, which is not coming from the tank itself. I'm not saying it's impossible, but we are trained, even me who does not operate a train, I am trained on a yearly basis on hazmat and what to do and what not to do when I get to the scene. So we normally work a lot with first responders. COVID has really kind of put a little bit of a crunch in. We used to do a lot more in-person training, so we let the fire department jump on top. They all know the placards. The fire department knows what's on those trains. We don't alert after 9/11. Everything stopped. We used to be able to give that to any community. That all stopped after 9/11. We no longer share that information because of the concerns we have on safety and security. Okay. Wow. So, but we do share it with your first responders. Okay. First responders are excluded from that no share list. So your local fire departments, county and city, have placard training with us, jump up to look at the seals and the leaks and to see what things look good and not, especially post a derailment. Now we have drones. We don't even send people anymore. We put up drones to see different things. So, I mean, technology is really helping us be safer, But believe me, those things are regulated. I'm not saying it's impossible. Nothing is impossible. I know that. But it is heavily regulated with industries that carry hazardous material. But all railroads in this country are required to carry it. Even if we don't want to, we don't have a choice because of the federal regulation on us as a primary transportation Class 1 railroad. Okay.
I think that's, thank you so much. That was so informative.
Right.
And I'll keep in touch with you because I'd
Perfect.
like to know about that.
Okay, all right. And I appreciate all of you staying. I know it was a little bit long-winded, and I apologize, but I'm hoping that I gave you information that's helpful to know what the railroad is dealing with today and how our world works these days. So I thank you so much for giving me the chance to be here, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lupe. Okay, just one more little announcement. Our next presentation is going to be on Wednesday, August 31st, from 1 to 3 here in the main ballroom. Our guest speaker will be Dr. Singh. He is a Chief Medical Officer and Director of Emergency at San Gorgonio Hospital. I will have flyers out in the lobby probably in the next week or so to let you know, but it's not until August 31st.